Hola, bienvenidos a Naxos. Esto es música clásica. Hoy vamos a estar charlando con el guitarrista dinamarqués Niklas Johansen acerca de la salida de su nuevo álbum grabado para el sello Our Recordings, en donde interpreta la obra Platero y Yo del compositor italiano Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco. Esta grabación ya está disponible en todas las plataformas de streaming y también se puede conseguir en formato CD en amazon.com. Para este podcast tuve el placer y el privilegio de haber podido entrevistar en inglés al guitarrista Niklas Johansen, y lo primero que le pregunté fue que nos hablara acerca de la relación que Castelnuovo-Tedesco tuvo con el gran guitarrista Andrés Segovia, para quien Castelnuovo-Tedesco escribió estas obras para guitarra y muchas de sus obras más importantes para guitarra. Y esto fue lo que me dijo.
He leído mucho sobre la relación entre Castelnuovo-Tedesco y Andrés Segovia, and it's quite funny to dig into to the relationship between Tedesco and Segovia, because as you just mentioned, Segovia commissioned a lot of pieces from Tedesco, but of course Segovia commissioned a lot of pieces from various composers, and we're very lucky to have all these compositions. But Tedesco seems to have been one of his absolute favorites, and he's been commissioning so many works from Tedesco. And it's very interesting because, as you also might know, there are all these letters that you can see between Tedesco and Segovia, just as you can with Ponce, for example. It's very nice to be able to read all these letters, because you get an idea of the relation between the different people that Segovia was writing with. And I feel when I read these letters between Tedesco and Segovia, you can also see that there's somehow a different relation there than there is with Ponce, for example. First of all, Segovia really praises this work Platero y Yo, which I've been recording, and he calls it the most poetic work of all works there are, which I find, that's one of the best things you can say about a work, that it's the most poetic one. And what I find different about the relationship between Segovia and Tedesco, of course, they praise each other a lot, which I think, back then they did a lot. That's part of the lingo. But also, if you're a little bit into drama, then it's also quite funny to read some of these letters, because I think a lot of other composers might have been more depending on Segovia in many ways, but Tedesco already had this career in United States as a film composer. So I think he also managed to, be a bit tougher to Segovia than many others were. So there is this letter where Segovia tells Tedesco that he will just completely remove all Tedesco program from his future program, because someone had told him that Tedesco didn't like his version of Capriccio Diabolico, which he wrote for Segovia. And then there's this, you can see these letters back and forth where then Tedesco in very praising words still criticizes his version of Capriccio Diabolico, and criticizes how Segovia didn't always play all the works that or perform all the works that Tedesco wrote for him, even if they were commissioned by Segovia. So it's quite interesting to see how, they were more like, in some ways, two two men on the same level, whereas other composers might have, having to be much more, careful about what to say. So that's an interesting relation that they have, I feel.
Ahora Niklas Johansen nos habla acerca de la música en esta serie de piezas inspiradas en los textos de Juan Ramón Jiménez que Castelnuovo-Tedesco escribiera en 1960. Y esto fue lo que me dijo.
Como un guitarrista quiero hablar sobre la música. Y me gusta esta música mucho porque me gusta Tedesco y su lengua me gusta mucho. He wrote these 28 pieces, which Platero y Yo consists of. And so he took 28 of the poems from, I think there are 138 poems in total in Platero y Yo. He also wrote them at different times, Juan Ramón Jiménez. But Tedesco wrote these 28 pieces over 28 of the poems, and he wrote them in 4 volumes. So you will also hear how volume 1 is kind of following the storyline, and then at every end of every volume, Platero is dead or is dying, and then the storyline kind of resets for every new volume. So when you hear all of the 28 poems or the 28 pieces, you kind of follow the same storyline 4 times. That's just the way it works, and I'm also really happy about that because it means I can, just perform 1 or 2 volumes at one concert, and then they will work as 2 halves. Whereas if I were to, play 28 pieces at a concert, it would be impossible to really make that work. But I really feel all these 28 pieces are just, getting into every corner of the expressiveness of the guitar. I really feel like none of these 28 pieces are really showing the exact same emotion, and there are almost no emotions I could think of that aren't somehow being shown throughout these 28 pieces. It ranges from the very silly and funny ones to very intense and tough parts, and of course also the very beautiful and nostalgic pieces are there as well, and those really shine through very well. And another thing that's also very important to explain about this work is that every piece itself is also very volatile, also compared to other things that Tedesco has written, because almost bar for bar the music can change so much. And the reason is that it's originally written for narration and guitar, That's of course an important thing to know about this, because I recorded the album as a solo album without any narration, and a lot of people played without narration too. Segovia, first of all, has recorded, I believe, 10 of these pieces, and a lot of people have recorded just a few pieces. And I do think it's more normal actually to play it solo nowadays than it is to play with narration, and it makes sense, I feel, because and also I chose, of course, to play it solo, because it does put a certain spotlight on the music that you don't really get with the narration. It's really beautiful with the narration too, but when you hear the music on its own, you can really hear how much quality it actually is. And yeah, of course, you never want that to be background music or to not have an important role. So our compromise, you could say, is that we have this booklet with all the 28 poems inside, and then the cartoon artist Halfdan Piskett has been drawing in black and white drawings, drawing for every single poem in this booklet. So that's our way of showing the poems, because they're a really important part of this music, of course. But at the same time, you hear the music as it stands on its own. But the music stands on its own without the narration, but that also kind of changes the music, I feel. Because when you have the narration, of course, you have you have that as the guiding the red thread to throughout the whole poem, throughout the whole piece, and you can really hear how sentence by sentence the music is changing rapidly, because when Juan Ramon Jimenez is suddenly describing something beautiful or something tragic, then the music can very suddenly change too. And in other kinds of music, like you could even mention just any other kind of music where people write for a poem. Very often you're just like describing the atmosphere with the music, and you're just describing the general atmosphere of the poem. But here it's really sentence by sentence very often, and sometimes there are even like rhythmic indications showing how to narrate the poem. So and a few times it's even being sung. So it's really a big part of it. So when you take that away, of course, you also have to think about how to play it a little bit differently. And yeah, that's why the music is
Perfect.
A lot more lively and volatile. But
Yeah.
Because every piece is not just showing the general atmosphere, but it's following it sentence by sentence. So you have to think differently about it.
Un fuerte agradecimiento a Niklas Johansen por la entrevista concedida, y para más información acerca de esta y otras grabaciones, no dejen de consultar nuestro sitio web www.naxosenespañol.com. No nos dejen de seguir por nuestras redes sociales. Soy Philip Adelfan y los espero en otro podcast de Naxos. Esto es Música Clásica. Chao.